Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Lee Memorial Uniting Church. My name is Mary Wahab, and I am the Secretary of the Palestinian Christians in Australia. I am honoured to be your MC for tonight's event, Bearing Witness Palestinian Christian Voices. Before we kick off our program tonight, it would be great if I can get you all to place your phone on silent mode so that we don't get any disruptions. Thank you. And to start and kick off this evening, I would like to invite Reverend Dr. Helen Richmond from the Uniting Church, a very dear friend of Palestinian Christians in Australia and a dedicated supporter of the many Palestinian refugees who have arrived from Gaza over the past 2.5 years. Please welcome Reverend Dr. Helen Richmond to present the acknowledgement of country and offer our opening welcome.
How wonderful to see you all here, almost a full house. There's a few chairs in the front row if you're brave to come forward. What a privilege it is to gather tonight for so many reasons. But let us give thanks that we gather on the ancient land of the Darug people, the Baramatical people of this area. And dear Yousef, who arrived last night safely, I got this picture that Susan sent giving you some native flowers. Oh, Kathleen. And we are reminded of the beauty of this land, of those who've walked from generation to generation caring for country, the land and the waters that God entrusted to them. And we pay respect to all First Nations people, and especially on this land where we are now, Baramatical people, the people of the Eel. The river's not far from here. If we could keep you longer, we'd walk along the river a bit. But I wanted us to, just for a moment, look at this beautiful painting that hangs in Lee Memorial, that's part of Parramatta Community Uniting Church. A beautiful painting by Leanne Mulga Watson. And she's painted some of this area here. When they did excavations on Parramatta Square, they found sites of campfires, gathering spaces, and they are now marked in a special way that over so many years people gathered, they celebrated, they had ceremony, they danced, they told stories, and they made a welcoming space. And there's the symbol of the welcoming, the campfires, the people, and there's also some of the totems, like the eels, the tortoise, and the turtle, the fish and platypus are there as well. And some native flowers, the banksia and the flannel flower. And Leanne Mulgo Watson wrote these words: the flannel flowers represent for Darug people the healing and love, and the Waratahs. And the footprints show people coming in and out of this area, including animal prints, as animals are our equal and share our country and are connected to us. Together, these all show our connection to country. And the river is a story. In the story shows Darug creation story. And it's a story about unity, sharing, healing, connection, love, our creation and people. So as we gather, let's give thanks to God for this land, this place. And we open our hearts that the Spirit of God would speak to us in a new and fresh way as we hear the story of Indigenous people from Palestine.
Thank you. This land always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Helen. Next, I would like to invite Suzanne Wahab, President of the Palestinian Christians in Australia, to share a few introductory words. Please give a warm welcome to Susan.
Good evening, everyone. I actually got my speech printed, and my sister printed it in the office and brought it, but I lost it. So I have to read it from my phone. But I'm just going to let it go and just talk from the heart, because it's only the heart that speaks the truth. It was my third version. So it's my third version. I wrote it today at 4 o'clock. But I know my story. I don't have to write and then try to memorize it. So I want to share with you today my story and the Palestinian Christian story that exists in Australia. So when I came here in Australia, and that was 14th of October 1986, so we're about to hit 40 years in this country, and I love it. I love being in Australia. I love the freedom that it allows a migrant, a woman, to be able to realize her potential and dance in the life that we have, and be alive, not suppressed. And my vision for everybody is to experience that, whether they're a man or they're a woman, whether they're Palestinian or they're Australian, because humans are all one family. If you're religious and you read the Bible, we all came, really, the people that are existing right now on the planet right now, they all came from Noah's 3 sons. Everything else is just a label. So we want to go back to that we are all human, we are all connected. And what we want to say to the Australian community as well is that the Palestinian people, just like Australians or Americans or Western or non-Western, we all deserve to live in freedom, to live in dignity. We all deserve to stay on our land. We do not deserve to be bulldozed away, one house after another, and have rubble for us to live under. This has been normalized, and we're expecting that this happens to Palestinians. Because if this happened to Australians, you would be thinking this is not normal, right? So this has been normalized for the Palestinians for the past 80 years. And we do not accept that. So when I came to Australia, on my first day at school, second day in Australia, one of the girls asked me, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Palestine. And the teacher said, there was a teacher just walked right next to me. And she said, there's no such thing as Palestine. And I was shocked. It was like, what do you mean? I just came from there. I came from Ramallah. I know, there are Palestinians there. And there was this altercation. There's no Palestine, it's only Israel. I said, no, there is Palestine. So there was this 17-year-old girl arguing with a 30-plus-year-old teacher, and I got upset. It was like, no, there is Palestine, and I'm standing up for my rights and standing up for my people. And then she said this statement that still rings in my ear. She said, if you want to live in this country, you need to forget about Palestine and pretend it doesn't exist. Otherwise, you will not succeed. And it's still in my mind. So I denied, after so many people, when you meet them after 4 or 5 years in Australia, I was denying. She got to me, and I was denying that I was Palestinian. I said, I'm from Jordan. I said, I'm from Lebanon. And when people ask you, where from Lebanon? Beirut, West Beirut, East Beirut. Then you realize I am lying. I do not want to lie. So my second job, when I went to my job, I said, I am refusing to lie. And what do I say? I'm Palestinian. But the firm that I was working with was Jewish. But they did not sack me. They accepted me. They loved me. I loved them. And I want people to get to that point. The denial is coming from people who are not aware of what's really happening in Palestine. And the reason we set up Palestinian Christians in Australia after so many decades in Australia is because we don't want to be erased. And we don't want to be a footnote in history. I refuse for us to be sent to history and people talk about us as if we existed, but we no longer exist. That will not happen. So today and every day, until the day I die, I will always make sure Palestine and the Palestinian people are forefront, in front of everybody's mind, whether they're my teacher, whether they're the prime minister, and whether they're the media. Because the media is telling you we do not exist. They're in denial about our rights, our freedom. They're in denial about the genocide that is happening in Palestine right now. And the ethnic cleansing where people are being driven house by house, village by village. Any decent human being, once they see, they cannot unsee. And that does not only include Palestinians or Arabs or Muslims. It includes Christians, it includes Jewish people, Western, non-Western. Once you know, you cannot unknow. And once you see, you cannot unsee. And tonight we will hear from someone who has had this lived experience, who has been there, who was born there, and has lived for the past 30 plus years under a brutal occupation. It's not a conflict, it's an occupation. And anyone who tries to argue with you on that has got rocks in their head. There's one Australian proverb that I've learned. Yeah, they got rocks in their head. It's not a conflict, it's an occupation. So tonight we welcome Dr. Yousef Khoury from Bethlehem Bible College to tell us about his experience, his theology, and his story. So welcome, Dr. Yousef Khoury.
Thank you. What a delight to be here. First of all, I have to acknowledge group of people who are among us, actually survivors of genocide themselves. Palestinian Christians from Gaza, families who are here, individuals who have lost their loved ones. We still have families in Gaza, and I'm sure they are sitting here while their heart and their minds are somewhere else, thinking about their families, their loved ones. Thank you so much, Susan, and for Palestinian Christians in Australia, for this prophetic role, speaking truth in the face of power. My name is Yousef Khoury. I'm Palestinian Christian. For many people, this sounds as oxymoron. For many people, I look like an exotic creature. But here I am, a Palestinian Christian. The literal translation of my name is Joseph the priest. Can you get that? Why? 36 generations of my grandfathers were priests of the Orthodox Church in Palestine. Meanwhile, our land has been described as a land without people. Our history is being erased as Palestinian Christians, forgetting the fact that the Christianity started from Palestine. Palestine is the homeland of Palestinian Christians. And Palestinian Christians belong as indigenous people to Palestine. And I'm here today to bear witness to the realities on the ground, but I think also it's important to uphold the Christian responsibility for the injustice we are facing, not alone, but I think with many of you, many of us here together. I live in Bethlehem, in a small town called Beit Sahur. 2,000 years ago, the angel of the Lord appeared in the sky to meek group of shepherds. He proclaimed peace on earth. That was the first gospel, that Jesus was to be born in Bethlehem, the land that gave birth to the Prince of Peace. But as Mahmoud Darwish, the Palestinian poet, says, peace to a land that was created for peace and never saw a peaceful day. For the past 80 decades, Palestine, a land created for peace, a land that witnessed and bear witness to the birth of the Prince of Peace, don't get to experience peace. And it's fascinating that our poet and prophet, Mahmoud Darwish, also still speaks to a prophet that for almost 2,000 years plus predates him, who's prophet Jeremiah in the Old Testament. Prophet Jeremiah in the Old Testament spoke to his people in Palestine around that time, in time where peace wasn't existent on a land filled with injustice, social, spiritual corruption, while many prophets tried to proclaim that there was peace, 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 such as that we experience today and hear about on the news, that there is a ceasefire, there is a sort of peace in Palestine, while we know there is no peace. And Prophet Jeremiah speaks into that. In Jeremiah 6:14, he says, they have healed the wound of my people lightly, saying, peace, peace, when there is no peace. Peace, peace, where there is no peace. And what I'm going to do today is to set the ground, because I was asked to talk about how Christians can support a just peace in Palestine. But there is no peace in Palestine. And in order to achieve a just peace, there has to be a roadmap. And this roadmap, I will offer it in 3 important milestones. First one is truth-telling, courage, and justice. This is exactly what the prophet Jeremiah did. In the face of kings, in the face of politicians, in the face of false prophets who proclaimed peace where there was no peace, he spoke truth. Peace, peace, but no peace. He had the courage to face the powerful. He had the courage to speak his convictions without fear. And he also called for justice for his people. So what about truth-telling as the first step? I think, Susan, you started us right exactly in that place. It's not a conflict. It is occupation. It is settler colonialism. It is ethnic cleansing. It is genocide. And we need to look at it as from the roots. Because for so many people around the world, the history of Palestine started on October 7, 2023. A dear friend of mine, the General Secretary of Kairos Palestine, sarcastically speaking about Christians in the West, that they believe when they read their Bible that Genesis 1:1 in the beginning was October 2023. As if God created the entire world on that date, that we only remember that portion of history. Truth-telling means recognizing the history of an open wound of the Palestinian people. And here I wish to focus on Palestinian Christians, not because the Palestinian Muslims are less important, not because of the Palestinian Jews. By the way, there were Palestinian Jews in the land of Palestine before Zionism. They existed, lived, and flourished. There are Samaritans who lived in Palestine, there were Baha'is lived in Palestine, and many other minority groups who enjoyed coexistence and flourished as communities together. But let me zoom on my people, the people that I can speak for and I can speak about. Before 1947, there were 10% of the Palestinian people were Christians. 10% of the Palestinians were Palestinian Christians. However, in the Nakba, the Palestinian catastrophe, more than 50,000 Palestinian Christians were displaced, dislocated, ethnically cleansed from Palestine. This is something that very few people know. 50,000 Palestinian Christians. This number is about 35% of the Palestinian Christian community in entire historical Palestine. They were erased and replaced. They were uprooted from the land of their ancestors so settlers can occupy their homeland. 30 churches plus were damaged, closed, priests exiled, and communities couldn't worship anymore in their holy places. This story is the story of more than 750,000 Palestinians. Those who've been waiting and dreaming for the day that they can return to their homeland. This is the story of my people, but also the story of my family. Please meet my grandmother. It's beautiful Jamila. Her name actually means Jamila. She was 10 years old when she was shoved into the back of a truck with her family and pushed into Gaza by the Zionist militias. For 77 years, Jamila dreamt of returning back home to Jaffa. I had the privilege of sitting with Jamila 3 years ago. And you know, when you get to meet your teta, your grandma, you think that they are, with all these memories. And sometimes we look at our grandmas when we think of the past. But I had a chance to ask her about the future. What was her dream? She told me, my dream is to go to Jaffa, to go home. Jamila passed away last year without fulfilling this dream. Thousands upon thousands of Palestinians endured the Nakba, lived with the dream to go back home, and was never allowed even that right, which is protected by the international community and the international law. The stories of Palestinian Christians, like many Palestinian villages out south, where people didn't voluntarily leave, as you might have heard over the news, or maybe teacher in the school said, but they were forcibly ethnically cleansed. Stories from Christian villages such as Kafr Bir'am, Ikrith, offer us a sample, a testimony of many other villages, almost 450 plus villages and towns and localities in entire historical Palestine were either completely destroyed, their indigenous communities removed, such as Kafr Bir'am. Kafr Bir'am, Christian community, they surrendered to the Zionist militia 2 weeks after the beginning of the war of 1948. They made an agreement with the Zionist militias that they spared their lives and their village. So the Zionist militias asked them to leave Kafr Bar'im for 2 weeks and return later. It's been 78 years, and the 2 weeks never ended. Maybe Zionists follow a different calendar than ours. These testimonies are well documented by many historians, including Israeli historians such as Ilan Pappé in the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. What the Palestinians experienced in 1948 needs to be clearly stated is an act of ethnic cleansing, genocidal war, and most importantly, an act of terrorism. These are not actually my words. These are the words of Zionist militant leaders who expressed the methods they used in 1948, which shows clearly that Palestinians didn't voluntarily leave their hometowns. This Zionist militant, describing his work in 1948, their vicious attacks on Palestinian towns, he states, terror was needed to make Arabs leave. So I wonder if some group of people talk about terror needs to be inflicted on a people, what they should be called. I'm not making suggestions here. But I think it's very clear who's the terrorist here. And the terror continues. The genocide didn't start in 2023. A genocide started since 1948 and even before 1948. The minute Zionists started talking about Palestine as a land without people, that was the genocidal starting point. They imagined our land as without people and moved ahead to make the land without a people. That's what actually genocide means. So genocide didn't start in 2023. Genocide didn't start in 1948. Genocide started the minute that the Zionist militia and the Zionist movement imagined Palestine as a land without people. And we should not be afraid of truth-telling. We should not compromise truth-telling. This is what the prophets did. They didn't bow down. They didn't put their heads in the sand and say, all is okay. They spoke truth to power. And this truth has been attested by many organizations, although as a Palestinian and Palestinian Christians, I don't need Amnesty International to tell me what's happening in my land. I don't need B'Tselem to tell me what's happening. I don't need the ICJ to tell me that is a genocide. I can see it. I can hear it from the words of the Zionist leaders. I can read about it in the written history of Zionism, planning to commit a genocide against the Palestinian people. And this genocide continues today with one manifestation in Gaza. And I said it earlier, I want to acknowledge that there are people here who are survivors of the genocide, the continuing unfolding genocide in Gaza. Because since the ceasefire, assumed ceasefire, which is no peace, no ceasefire, more than 1,200 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza. But in the recent report of the United Nations, particular interest in the victims, Palestinian victims, mostly of children, and these numbers are pretty clear. At least 20,000 children have been killed and more than 44,000 injured. Today, Gaza stands as the largest land with the largest number of amputees. And I believe also the largest numbers of families that have been erased from civil registry. More than 2,000 families been completely erased from civil registry so far. Palestinian Christian community in Gaza has suffered immensely as well. Stands today as a testimony, bearing witness for a community that has long history of witnessing to the good news of Jesus, to the Prince of Peace in Palestine since the first century. Today, they are facing an existential threat. Since October 2023, we have lost more than 50% of the Christian Palestinian population in Gaza. 18 people were killed on the night of October 19, 2023, Israeli airstrike near the Orthodox Church of St. Porphyrios. Alongside many of their Muslim neighbors. This is maybe sounds a small number compared to more than 70,000 Palestinians have been killed in the genocide unfolding in Gaza so far. Because each person of them had dreams, story to tell. I wish each of them can stand here and tell their stories. Wish many of them had a chance to go to school, to college, to fall in love for the first time, to break up maybe even for the first time, just to experience life. Today we are standing remembering more than 70,000 precious souls from Gaza, including more than 18 Christians. I believe the number of Christians who have been killed by the Israeli military directly or indirectly in Gaza so far past 35 people. Today I had an interview on ABC News and asked me, what about the Christian community in Gaza and their history living under Hamas? I asked the host, do you believe in data that's objective? And he said yes. I told him, in the past 20 years, only one Palestinian Christian was killed by an Islamic radical group compared to 35 Christians killed by the Israeli military. This terror does not end in Gaza, but expands to the West Bank. Palestinian Christian village of Taibe, the skirts of Ramallah, population of roughly 1,500 people, have sustained and endured more than 1,680 attacks in the past 2 years. Can you comprehend this number? 1,600. Almost 2 attacks every single day. 2 friends of mine who lived in Taibe, their cars were set on fire, their homes vandalized, that they had to leave. They could not stay there because the Israeli settlers, every single day, they are terrorizing, I think the right word, terrorizing the indigenous Palestinian community in Taiba. Taiba is not alone. The town where I live, town of Beit Sahur, town bear witness to the angel, proclaimed the birth of the Prince of Peace, today is facing also another existential threat. Only in the past several months, since November 2025, Israeli settlers seized a land that was dedicated to build children's hospital for the past 15 years. Started an outpost. A few weeks afterwards, the Israeli Minister of Finance, Bezalel Smotrich, legalized the settlement, annexed more land, Now this settlement stands on more than 25 acres of Beit Sahur, threatening the indigenous community in the town. As I told you, I live there. My wife and I, we avoid driving late because Israeli settlers might attack our car. Israeli settlers might close the gates around Beit Sahur, which I will talk about a bit later. And many of the Christian families, because the majority of the families living around this settlement are Christian, now are anticipating with severe anxiety orders of demolition to their homes. In the past 2 years, more than 200 families, Christian families, left Bethlehem, not voluntarily immigrated. They were ethnically cleansed due to the Israeli expansion of settlements, restriction on movements, and settler terror, and of course to the systematic injustice and oppression under Israeli colonialism and settler colonialism. And the Israeli settlement is only a drop in Beit Sahur to what's happening in the rest of the West Bank. If you look at the map here, since 1967 to the present day, how the settlements expanded all over the West Bank. Currently, there are more than 700,000 settlers live in illegal settlements in the West Bank. And according to the International Court of Justice and their advisory opinion of 2024, any settlement in the occupied West Bank is illegal under the international law. It fascinates me when there are some people talking about peaceful settlers in the West Bank, as if, according to the international law, they can live in the West Bank. By their very presence in the West Bank, they are breaking the international law. Not only the settlements, but also what comes with the settlements. Currently, in the West Bank, there are more than 925 road obstacles, blocks, gates, checkpoints. I think sometimes we're so used to travel freely. You can drive me from the airport to here with no worries. For a Palestinian to drive 2 kilometers, sometimes it takes 8 hours because you have to wait for the Israeli checkpoint. And if it's open, it might not be open. In fact, in the past 2 days, the Israelis located Nablus that women had to give birth at a checkpoint because they weren't allowed the ambulances to go to the hospitals. In Beit Sahur alone, where I live, in the past couple of months, 3 new gates were installed. So every single day we are expecting and experiencing these new ways of dehumanization, humiliation by the Israeli military, road restrictions that keeps increasing in the West Bank, which of course leads to the decline of the number of Palestinian Christians who systematically are denied their right to worship freely in their holy sites in Jerusalem, like many other Palestinians, but also to commute to their families and their communities. This is what many organizations called apartheid, a system of domination by one people, a group, over another. But Salem, an Israeli human rights organization, Amnesty International, and Al-Haq, Palestinian human rights organization, in addition to Kairos Palestine, International Kairos for Justice, provide all data and analysis to showcase how the Israelis have installed and imposed a system of racial, religious segregation in the West Bank. Keep in mind that a Palestinian who lives 1 kilometer from an Israeli settler lives under completely different law and on the same land. The settler is treated and usually processed under civil law, while a Palestinian under military law. Truth-telling requires and demands that we continue to speak truth, analyzing the situation, because the Nakba, the genocide, has not stopped, continues to the present day. Statements, the billboards, stickers placed by the Israelis that there is no future for us in Palestine. The settler terror, the Israeli policies of apartheid, genocide, settlements, settler terror are attempts to make no future for the Palestinians in their homeland. We are bearing witness to a very existential threat to the Palestinian people. And allow me to shock all of us with these realities, because I don't want to talk about false hope. Because I think we always look for these kind of superhero stories. I travel around the world speaking about Palestine, the Palestinians, and every time I get the question, what about hope? What gives you hope? And feels like what the prophet Jeremiah talks about. Hope, hope, but there is no hope. The reality on the ground is hopeless. That doesn't mean that I'm not hopeful, but the reality on the ground is hopeless. We have to stop romanticizing the Palestinian resilience and sumud. We have to speak truth to ourselves and to those around us. And one of the items that I wish also to highlight here, one of the truth-telling that we need to speak, is about what endangers the very existence of Palestinians and the very Palestinian Christians. I hear all over the news, you read it on social media if you scroll, but Palestinian Christians are leaving from Palestine because of the Palestinian Authority or because of the Palestinians' factions. I get this all over again. And I ask people, did you read the reports on Palestine? Where do you get your reports from? Are you listening to Palestinian Christians, or you are listening from someone else who's speaking on behalf of Palestinian Christians? Because if we are listening to Palestinian Christians, they are very clear on who's putting most pressure on them. According to this study, 2020, before 2023, 83 to 84% of Palestinians, Christians, they are worried about settlers' attacks, a potential denial of their civil rights, or an Israeli expulsion of Palestinians from their homelands. Additionally, 73 are worried about the endless Israeli occupation, and 67% are worried about an Israeli annexation of Palestinian territories. Here are the numbers. I believe that numbers are objective. A Christian organization that's really interested in the persecution of Christians in the Middle East conducts its study on an annual basis and publishes a report every year called War Watch Report. So I went to read the report about Palestine. While many Christian organizations support Israel and Zionism, and they parrot the same propaganda that Palestinian Christians are pushed out by their Muslim neighbors and because of the Palestinian Authority, this organization made very clear conclusion. Palestinian Christians report, and here I quote from that report of the organization, which is Open Doors International. It is Israel's control of the West Bank and the current war on Gaza which causes most pressure on their lives. I didn't want to read the whole report. This sentence was enough. Conclusion: what causes, what pressures, which group of people, which system is persecuting the Palestinian Christian community and Palestinians in general? But telling truth is not enough. We can all have this kind of, energy and sort of temporary power to tell the truth. However, it has to be accompanied with courage. Courage to confront harmful theologies and ideologies in our communities, and particularly in our churches. The heads of churches in the Holy Land, in their statement early January 2026, they made it very clear that the Christian Zionism is a harmful theology. We need to have the courage to say that there are harmful theologies within the Christian churches. Theologies that have been causing destruction and death in their homeland because they have their own interpretation of the scripture that does not bring peace, does not bring justice, nor reconciliation. As a Christian, Jesus has taught us that we can discern things by their fruits, right? And if we look at a Christian Zionism, we can know their fruits. Supporting oppression, funding settlements, weaponry, causing the very existential threat to the Palestinian Christians in Palestine. So we need to have the courage to confront these harmful theologies, to name them out, to the point that I think we need to call them out as theologies of terror. Theologies of terror. They are causing terror to communities. They are causing terror to our community. And theologies that create terror don't have theo in their ideology. Because theology is supposed to be about God. And the God of the Bible, God who called us to love our neighbors and our enemies, God who called us for justice, God who called us to stand out and speak for the oppressed, does not fit with that ideology. So we need to name with courage Christian Zionism as a theology of terror. And it's time to speak with this courage as Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the very victim of the empire. After confronting the Nazi regime for their atrocities in Germany, he spoke with courage that costed him his life. And I think he speaks to many of us today. And I think speaks also to the church in Australia in many ways. He says, in response to the silence of the church, the complicity of the church, the fear of the church, to make a clear decision, courageous decision about the realities of the oppressed people, such as in Palestine today. I believe if he's still alive, he would have said the same thing again. To delay or fail to make decisions may be more sinful than to make wrong decisions out of faith and love. In this case, it is really now or never. And I say this to you. It's now or never. Too late means never. Let us shake off our fear of this world. The cause of Christ is at stake. Are we to be found sleeping? are we to be found sleeping? Bonhoeffer, as someone who walked the footsteps of Jesus, was committed to truth-telling. He had the courage to face the Nazi regime. These words speak to us today. It's now or never. And I think it's also really important to highlight that we cannot solve any disputes using religious text. We cannot continue to do that, which Christian Zionists do the whole time. And I here have a picture of, in fact, the Israeli ambassador in the United Nations in 2019 when he was asked about the legitimacy of their claim to the land. He didn't bring a title deed. He didn't bring documents of the international law. He didn't bring peace agreement. He brought the Bible. And the Christians around the world who adopt a Zionist understanding of the Bible have been weaponizing the very source of life-giving scripture as tool of death for the Palestinians. And here Mitri Rahib, a Palestinian theologian, responds to this kind of misuse and weaponization of sacred texts to legitimize occupation and settler colonialism in Palestine. And I quote, "No one should be allowed to use biblical rights to violate human rights." Not Jewish settlers, Israeli politicians, or naive Christian theologian. Kairos, Palestine, the Ecumenical Document of Palestinian Christians, 2025. Help us to understand what courage means at this time. What needs to be done out of our courage and truth-telling. And this document that's been causing a lot of trouble, I think maybe also in this part of the world, after the Archbishop of the Anglican Church in England only said that she's willing to be listening to Palestinian Christian, only listening, not even acting or endorsing, only listening, and caused lots of trouble. Of a document that actually speaks truth to power with courage. Kairos, Palestine, 2 states, true solutions don't begin with religious texts, be weaponized to justify occupation, but with the dismantling oppressive racist systems. Only then can we speak of a new horizon that we dream of and long for, one in which we remain in our land together with all who dwell in it, on the basis of justice, equality, and equal rights, free of supremacy and domination. This is the courage that we need to take that prophetic call like Jeremiah today. And the third milestone on Jeremiah's roadmap is justice. And for so long, many Christians want Christianity without justice, want a cheap form of Christianity. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the same victim of the empire, talks about 2 forms of grace: cheap grace and costly one. Cheap grace that does not carry the consequence, does not bear the cost of following Jesus. And the same here, we can talk about the Christianity. There is a cheap form of Christianity that does not want to have justice, does not want to speak for justice, while actually one of the first commandments that God gives to his people is this: justice and only justice you shall follow. I wonder how come many Christians and many Bible believers, they uphold strictly to thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, and they forget that the first commandments is this one. This is the sheep form of Christianity that does not want justice. So I think as Christians, and I think as people created in the image of God, we are called for justice. Kairos Palestine too imagine this form of justice, justice that does not compromise on truth. Justice that does not bow to the empire. Justice that holds occupiers and oppressors accountable. Justice that does not replicate the same oppressive tools of the empire and the oppressors. Justice that resists with the logic of love. I think I'd encourage you to read Kairos Palestine, the first document and the second document. These are two of the most important theological contributions for the church in our world today. Because in the face of atrocities, in the face of dehumanization, demonization, oppression, when many talk about violence as the only way and might makes right, Palestinian Christians talk about logic of love as a form of resistance. This logic of love that requires us to stand up and resist evildoers, resist occupation through creative, nonviolent means. Creative, nonviolent means that can be sanctions, boycott, divestments from the oppressive. Cutting the bloodline that feeds the machinery of killing and destruction in Palestine and where else. And this resistance is moved with the logic of love because it calls on the humanity of the oppressor. Our call as Christian Palestinians, the call of Kairos Palestine for justice, is a call to make the enemies neighbors. It's a call to repentance from the sin of oppression. Because our liberation is tied. Liberating the oppressor brings about the liberation of the oppressed. And as much as the oppressor thinks that we are the oppressed, in fact, it's the other way around. We are the free. We are the liberated. While they are the oppressed, because they hold this darkness in their spine. While we choose love, while we choose the logic of love. And this is the vision that we continue to uphold as Palestinian Christians, and I believe as those who support and endorse Kairos Palestine. That in the midst of our pain, the genocide, the displacement, our cries are prophetic cries of steadfastness. Our cries are cries for equality and justice. And this is exactly where the prophetic role leads us. And I wish to remind us that the prophetic mandate continues to speak to us today. And this is what Prophet Amos, like Prophet Jeremiah, speaks about. When the kingdom of the people thought they are all powerful, They don't need peace. They don't need justice. Prophets speak truthfully, courageously, that justice must be rolling down in the land, but also in our world. Because justice is the freeway. I think here in Australia you call it the national way. What do you call it? The freeway. The freeway to peacemaking. We cannot have detours around justice. We cannot achieve peace without justice. And as much as I said, there's a cheap version of Christianity without justice, there is also a cheap form of peace that doesn't go through justice. And this is what Jesus called us. Jesus called us to blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. And Jesus knew that peacemaking requires the courage, requires truth-telling. Jesus didn't call us to wait for peace. But many times, people think like peace should be something to wait for in the future. A friend of mine, Lama Mansour, says, many around the world excuse their ignorance and their inaction by saying, oh, these people have been always fighting. These people are always killing each other. There will be no peace in the land until Jesus comes back. She asks, but what about us? And Jesus in the scripture is very clear. He didn't call us to be peace waiters, nor war wagers, but peacemakers. These are the children of God. And I would like to conclude with that, because my roadmap is very simple. Truth-telling, courage, and justice. And like Jeremiah, Prophet Isaiah speak these words clearly. And a quote here from Isaiah 1:17, when God is speaking to the prophet, learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, plead the widow's cause. Friends, we are standing at a crossroad. It's now or never. It's now or never. I'm afraid that we will keep waiting until the entire Palestinian people are erased. This is time where the church stands at a crossroad. It has to make a decision with the prophetic clarity and courage to speak it truth to power. Truth to power that Israel is an occupying, dominating, oppressive, settler, colonial regime on the land of Palestine committing a genocide. Courage to say that there are Christian theologies been causing terror for the people of Palestine. There must be justice. And in order to achieve justice, there must be resistance. Resistance in the logic of love. We have to call to hold the oppressor accountable. Not out of revenge, not out of desire to destroy, but to build. This is our call, to resist in the logic of love, creative, non-violent means. We are called to be peacemakers, justice seekers, and truth tellers and speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. It was such a heartwarming presentation. Thank Thank you very much, Dr. Khoury, for sharing such a powerful presentation with us today. We are now moving into our Q&A portion of the evening. Joining Dr. Yousef Khoury to facilitate and answer your questions is Reem Burrows. Please come. And there's probably a few more books outside for Reem as well.
Thank you so much, and Dr. Yousef, what an incredible heart. We were crying. And as Palestinians sitting watching you, we couldn't help ourselves but come up with all these sayings ourselves and feeling the pain. And I have my friend Rania here, who is from Jerusalem, sitting next to me. I know that you felt it very much, Rania. And I do have to say also, your Teta Jamila Maibshi, rest in eternal peace and love, and how absolutely beautiful. My father, who was 90 this year, passed away 3 months ago. And one of the last things he said, especially with the onslaught on Gaza, was, "When will this end?" And he cried and then passed away. One question that I do have for you is, you talked a lot about the Western Christianity. And it does feel like, as Palestinian Christians who exported Christianity to the world, Christianity has been hijacked. Are we any closer to having the church in the West recognize Palestinian Christians and the true teachings of Jesus Christ?
It's too hard. I think this is really a hard question because it's multi-layered. And I think it's really important also to recognize that Western Christianity is espoused to racism and Orientalism. It's looking at us as Palestinians as subhuman somehow, as our knowledge, we are incapable of producing knowledge, of writing our own theologies, of reading our own scriptures. We are not trustworthy enough to offer to the world how we follow Jesus, but we need to follow their own discipleship books and their own readings of the scriptures. We are only seen as obstacle to their vision for the eternity and God's restoration to the Jewish people and the second coming of Jesus. Unfortunately, until the Western Church recognize its racism, deconstruct its theology, I wish I can say that I'm hopeful. But I'm also grateful that there are many indigenous theologians, many in the global south, from Latin America, from Asia, from Africa. And you are in the south, by the way, unless if you don't recognize that, right? Yes. Work together and organize to face the Western dominance. Yes.
Thank you. And that is the truth and courage that we all need to aspire to. We do want to open it up for question time. There is a mic in the middle of the aisle if anyone does have a question right now, and if we can just line up. We have about 5 minutes of questions. It may be a couple of questions, if actually 2 questions. 15? 10 minutes, I'm so sorry. So we've got about 2-3 questions, but please.
Thank you very much for your talk. Our hearts have stopped hearing you speak, and thank God you got here to meet us, and may God protect you on your journey and what the future holds for you and your people. Could you please explain what I can only see as a perversion of the American evangelicalism and MAGA movement that has in many ways assisted the genocide. I mean, how do you look away? And what can you say about that kind of depravity and perversion of evangelicalism American style?
I think you made it very clear. And I can't find a Christianity in any of that. I think Christian faith is pretty straightforward. And if I want to summarize the Christian faith to anyone, I would ask them to go and read the Sermon on the Mount. And I will make it the checklist for American evangelicalism that support MAGA, support Zionism. And it won't pass the test. Secondly, I think Christianity comes from the idea that we should be Christ-like. And I can assume safely that American evangelicalism and the MAGA movement and Zionism also does not pass the test. There is no Christ-like thing in American Christianity that supports genocide. It calls to hate our enemies while Jesus commands us to love our enemies. That seeks to kill people while God speaks to offer life. This is what Jesus said, I came to give you life and life abundance. That's why I believe we must create these checklists of any theologies that we face. Maybe here in Australia the same. What are the non-negotiables? And if any form of Christianity passes that test, then it is reflective of Christ. But if it's like Christian Zionism, is a theology of terror, where we cannot find we cannot find God in that ideology, then it's not Christianity. It's, as you said, a perversion of Christianity.
Are there any other questions? Please.
You said that the Christians are a minority in Palestine.
Yes.
Well, so the majority are Muslim.
Yes.
And how does the community with the Christian and the Muslim in, say, Gaza or all over Palestine, how do they connect? Do they get along or they don't get along?
I believe...
What's the story there with standing next to each other, or are they against each other?
Yes, this is an excellent question. Do you would like to cover 100 years or in past 20? Honestly, which part? Now. Yes. I think one of the most beautiful and ugly examples that I would give you when we stand at a checkpoint together. When we are denied the freedom of worship together. Palestinian Christians and Muslims alike, they recognize that they are first and foremost Palestinians. And they are treated likewise, and they live together in this way. In fact, Palestinian theologian Yousef Khoury, who is a Catholic priest, brilliant. I wish his writings are translated into English, but mostly in Arabic. He was frustrated with the term coexistence. So he decided to choose a different term. And he said that Palestinian Christians and Muslims, and by the way, non-Zionist Jews and Samaritans, they are doing life together. Because coexistence sometimes connotates that, we don't like each other, but, we are enduring this kind of relationship. But Palestinian Christians and Muslims and other religious groups in Palestine, in the West Bank, in Gaza, in East Jerusalem, they share life, they share bread. I'll tell you a story, and this is the story that I wish to share with you. My parents are in Gaza. They've been in Gaza throughout the ongoing genocide. And when there was no flour in Gaza to make bread, and my parents were barely surviving on whatever they had at home. Her Muslim neighbor had bread. So every day she baked the bread, she brought loaves for my parents. When actually food was the rarest commodity in Gaza, they continued to share it. But this is not only the story of Gaza genocide. During the first Intifada, when the Israeli military besieged Shati refugee camp, Palestinian women moved their doughs and baked their bread near the refugee camp, and they started throwing the bread and the loaves of bread to the refugees inside, Christians and Muslims. I think this answers your question. I think it's the deep love and respect for a life together. Yes.
I find it increasingly difficult to be an honest Christian in Australia, but also in Germany or wherever else. I think our credibility can only be gained by decolonizing church, Christianity, thinking, action, everything. So I'm very, very grateful for what you're saying. And I wonder if you have any chance, while you're here, to connect with some indigenous Christians here that are, in spite of everything, still continuing to believe that Christianity is worth it and might learn about holistic being in this world, embracing all of creation and our being part of the land. And one of them that comes to mind, for example, is Naomi Wolf. I think it is Wolf, that just spoke at Uniting Church in Pitt Street with another indigenous woman from America, from Chicago. And they had many parallels, but there's lots of dialogue going on also with Latin American Christians, etc. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I think this is a conversation must to be had with indigenous communities, because there is a lot of wealth in their experience, despite the painful experience under settler colonialism, But I think as Palestinians we can learn so much. We can be in this constructive conversation. I would like just to make one point. I think we need to decolonize our mind rather than decolonize Christianity, because a Christianity that's like Christ is not colonized.
But the compact with the power
Yes.
is undeniable, and we need to admit what we have done.
Yes.
We have owned God to be this package that we bring to the world.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yes.
So I'm just thank you very much, first off. I'm wondering, at the moment here in Australia, we're going through a royal commission into anti-Semitism. And I've noticed that you've been very careful to use the term Zionist throughout your presentation. I was just kind of wondering your thoughts around, I guess, kind of language and some of that, just thinking that I think sometimes people and churches kind of shy away from talking about some of this because they're afraid of being seen as anti-Semitic. I'm just kind of wondering your perspective on that.
Thank you so much. May I have my presentation again, but on the last, the fourth slide from the last. I'll tell you for many reasons why I'm doing that. First of all, I think it's critical at this point to distinguish between Zionism, Judaism, and Israelism. Not all Jews are Zionists. In fact, the majority of Zionists in the world are Christians. Okay? Not all Jews are Zionists. Not all Zionists are Jews. It's obviously clear with the Christians too. Not all Israelis, nor Zionists, nor Jews. For example, I have a Palestinian with Israeli citizenship who were forced to have this citizenship because of they remain in the land. You have Samaritan Israelis, you have Muslim Israelis, and they don't endorse or support Zionism. And building this distinction is really important. I think the IHRA, for example, the International Holocaust Remembrance definition of anti-Semitism is dangerous because it confuses Israel, Zionism with Judaism. I'm grateful, deeply grateful for the hundreds and thousands of Jews who stand and speak prophetically against Zionism. And it's been the case since actually the 19th century. The chief rabbi of a city in Germany, I'm trying to remember, I think in Munich, when Theodor Herzl proposed convening the first Congress at the Zionist Congress in Germany, his response was the following: that Zionism is the antithesis of Judaism. And I think we need to rely on these voices. We need to defend our Jewish siblings' right to say that Zionism does not represent me, Israel does not represent me. Any place where Jews live, they should live safely, they should prosper. And the whole idea that Israel is the only safe place for Jews, I think it's utterly dangerous. Jewish people anywhere should feel safe. In Australia, in Palestine, and then in the US, in Europe, anywhere. Secondly, I think there are issue of terminologies, and here where I would like, because I hear it a lot when people tell me like Israel is not colonization, Israel is not settler colonialism, right? And one of the key answers that I found very helpful is from the writings of the Zionists themselves. And this is why I chose this to show it to you later. Because if you look Ze'ev Jabotinsky, if you look Herzl, they spoke about themselves as colonialists. So if anyone would challenge the whole idea of terminology when it comes to Palestine, that the state of Israel is a settler colonial state, then they need to ask their founders. It's not my issue. Actually, those are their confessions. And shouldn't we trust them? Ze'ev Jabotinsky speaks about the colonialist strives to defend themselves. And he says that this is the Arab of Palestine response to Zionism. I think it's pretty clear. The second slide is actually from Theodor Herzl. If I can move it from here, I believe. You can find that Theodor Herzl actually invites the white supremacist, racist, colonialist Cecil Rhodes in a letter to help him in the project of colonization of Palestine. And you can see it very clear. He's speaking about Zionism because it is something, what? Colonial. So, first of all, we need to be very clear, on making these distinctions. Second, I think we need to use the voices of Zionists, because if we listen to them, they can tell us the whole truth that we need about their project. Which is, they say that it's a settler colonial project that comes at the expense of the Palestinian people through violent means. Yes.
Just one comment, Dr. Khoury. I just want to congratulate the Reformed church leaders in Palestine who really are the ones really taking up, doing the heavy lifting. So and I speak as an Orthodox Christian, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question, sorry. Am I allowed to ask one question? I'm so sorry.
Why not?
Okay, I don't want to be disrespectful. I listened to everything that you had to say, but this is my question. If two people each sincerely believe that they have legitimate claim to that land, who does it really belong to? And who was the first people on that land? That's the question that I have.
Wonderful. How far do you want to go? Okay. We can go to, let's talk about 8000 BCE, the first city in Palestine in Jericho, and the Canaanites who built that city. Or do you want to go to the Arabs who occupied Gaza 1800 BCE? I think what we need to recognize that Palestine is a land of mixed people. That Palestine has a history of 10,000 years where people from every continent, from Asia, Europe, and Africa, came through, they occupied and lived. And I think religious books should not be used to claim any legitimate right, exclusive right to Palestine. I think the Jewish people have history and heritage in Palestine that has to be respected, as much as Christians have, as much as Samaritans have, as much as Muslims and other groups. So the whole issue, I think, it's the problem of domination. When one group wants to dominate the rest, where might makes right, rather than abiding by the international law and the human rights. Yes, thank you.
Great answer. Okay, thank you to everybody who asked the questions, and thank you to Reem and Dr. Yousef for the engaging discussions. So to bring our formal program to a close, I would like to invite Reverend Mata Have Hilau, moderator of the Synod of New South Wales and ACT, to offer a concluding prayer and words of thanks. Please welcome Reverend Mata.
Thank you so much. As we begun this evening, Helen acknowledged the first people of this land. And I too, as a second people to this land, as a Pacifica woman, would like to acknowledge the Waramariko people of the Darug Nation, of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to them. We know the story of our own Indigenous people here in Australia. And still now we are continuing to reconcile the damage and the harm that was done to our first people. Dr. Yousef, on behalf of the Uniting Church State of New South Wales ACT, as a moderator, as a leader of this state, there are over 500 congregations across New South Wales and the Australian Capital Territory, many services. I'd like to thank you for the informative, inspiring, and I learnt so much that I did not know about Palestine. I know that many of us here in the room joined Helen and our friends, Christian friends from Palestine, in our walk across the Harbour Bridge here in Sydney. And it feels like back then it was a bold thing to do, but it actually feels very, very minute. But it was simply a sign of solidarity to say that we weren't just saying the words that we are, but we are walking and attempting to do something. So I thank you for your knowledge and for the inspiration of your story, for the truth-telling, for the courage, and for calling us to justice. And so I'm not a scholar. I'm simply a woman that follows Jesus, that stand here as a representative of the church to say thank you, but also to call us in this time of prayer. Like my sister here, I had a whole prayer written out, but I just feel that the Spirit is actually calling us to have this collective time of just calling us to pause and to think about what our own action is after hearing this inspirational message for us this evening. So this evening, the invitation to prayer is simply this. If you are left-handed, I invite you to raise your left hand and keep it up there. If you are right-handed, I invite you to raise your right hand and keep it there. And it means that everybody here should have a hand up. And if you haven't, I'm going to come around. So if you were to bring this hand forward right in front of your face, and imagine for a moment that this is a mirror, what are you seeing? Are you loving what you're seeing? Or are you saying, I should have got that haircut last week? Or maybe got that wax, I don't know. But I want to remind you this evening this is our prayer. We're just staying awake. That you are seeing somebody who is created in the image of God. Our thumb reminds us of the people and the communities that are closest to us. Who are they? Who are the people that are closest to you? Who are the people that are sitting right next to you, before or behind you? What are the stories? What are the experiences of survivors of genocide or people who advocate for justice? But this thumb also reminds us that we have the power to do good or the power to not contribute to good in our community. What are you choosing? Our pointers remind us to pray for those that point us in the right direction. Who is it that's pointing us in the right direction? This evening I am reminded of my call as a woman of faith. What does it mean to love God with my whole being and to love my neighbour exactly as I want to be loved? What does it mean to hear the cries of the people in Palestine? What does it mean for us to point others into the right direction? Our next finger is definitely not the rude finger tonight, but it is the tallest of our hand, reminding us to pray for leaders, for people like Dr. Yousef, for leaders of our local government, for leaders of our world. What is our calling? To call them out. And when they are rude, what is our role to do in that? To pray for leaders, for theologians. And we're addressing what Yousef has said. How do we stop weaponizing the scripture in ways that continue to harm our community? And our next calling of our prayer is, our ring finger is the weakest of our hand. I'm told that by a medical doctor. And this is the call, guys. The most vulnerable in our community is people like the people that we serve in our soup kitchen here, right here at Parramatta. But tonight is a call to stand together with our friends in Palestine. I think the sign here up the front is quite clear. To stop the genocide, starvation, and what does the third one say?
Occupation.
how do we stand alongside those that are weak and vulnerable and crying out for our help? And lastly, our pinky is you and I. And tonight, it's not just about our hands, but how can we use our voices, our positions, whether we are leaders of the church, leaders of our community, our congregation, leaders of Christian church, or whoever of us that are here, how can we use all that we are as people created in the image of God? And I love Jeremiah, Dr. Yousef, because it reminds us that while we were still formed in our mother's womb, God knew us. And I believe tonight God continues to call us to go from here and to continue to stand for justice and to do good wherever we are. Lord, this is our prayer that I've shared out loud, and prayers that are deeply in your hearts and on the people of Palestine. And we offer it to God in the mighty name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
All right, it's almost a wrap-up. Thank you, Reverend Mata, for this beautiful prayer. It's very inspiring, very tearful. Palestinian Christians in Australia would like to thank Dr. Yousef Khoury for visiting us in Sydney to share with us the lived experience of Palestinian Christians and to show us a way that we can achieve in a just peace in our Holy Land. We would like to thank the National Council of Churches for their financial support for making this speaker tour possible. We would also like to thank the sponsoring organisations that helped make this event in Parramatta possible: Palestine-Israel Ecumenical Network. I think I said that right. Parramatta Community of Uniting Church, Parramatta for Palestine, and Friends of Sabil for their support. That officially concludes the formal program for tonight, but before you leave, a few quick reminders. If you haven't already done so, please make sure you pick up the Ask Flyer as well as information on the upcoming Christ at the Crossroad event taking place in Sydney next year in February. And a huge thank you to all our volunteers from PCIA and Parramatta Uniting Church and Parramatta for Palestine, our speaker, Dr. Yousef Khoury, and to all of you for being here tonight to bear witness. Thank you, stay safe, and have a wonderful evening. I just want to also let you know that you can take this flyer as you leave. This is Support a Just Peace in the Holy Land. Take action with us. So just grab one on the way out. Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone.